Hyunwoo adjusted his diplomatic uniform one last time as he stared out the viewport of the neutral station. The stars looked the same as they did from Earth, but everything else felt different. This was humanity's first real chance to make friends with the Keltharian Confederacy, and he did not want to mess it up. The Keltharians controlled a huge part of space near human territory. They looked like giant crystal bugs that could walk on two legs, and they had been the strongest military force in this area for thousands of years. What made them different was how they fought. They believed in honor and personal combat, and their warriors were famous across the galaxy for never backing down from a fight. Captain So-min walked into the room, her boots clicking on the metal floor. She carried a datapad and had that serious look she always wore before important meetings. Hyunwoo had worked with her before, and he trusted her judgment completely. "The Keltharian ship just docked," she said. "Their war prime is coming aboard with his honor guard." "But Hyunwoo, there's something strange about this whole meeting." "Strange how?" Hyunwoo asked, turning away from the viewport. So-min pulled up files on her datapad. "They specifically asked to meet with us after watching our people fight space pirates near the border worlds. Our Marines drove off 3 pirate fleets in the last month, and apparently the Keltharians were watching the whole time." "That's good, right? We showed them we can fight." "That's just it," So-min said, frowning. "They're not asking to meet because they're impressed with our fighting. They're asking because they're confused. Their messages keep talking about unusual military behavior and unexplained warrior patterns. I've read their communications 5 times, and I still don't understand what they mean." Hyunwoo felt his stomach tighten. First contact situations were always tricky, but when the other side was confused about something basic, it usually meant trouble. "Do we know what confused them?" "Not exactly, but I've been studying Keltharian military culture for months. They fight in family groups during specific seasons when resources are scarce. Their warriors are usually related to each other, and they only organize into armies when they need to compete for territory or mates. The idea of professional soldiers doesn't exist in their society." The station's communication system crackled to life. "Attention all personnel. The Keltharian delegation is now boarding. All diplomatic staff report to Conference Room Alpha." Hyunwoo straightened his jacket and picked up his translator device. The small machine would help him understand the Keltharians' complex clicking language, but it couldn't help him understand their thinking. That would be up to him. They walked through the station's corridors, passing other diplomatic teams from various species. The Delphini delegation swam through their mobile water tanks, their long bodies moving gracefully through the artificial ocean. The Sectorix representatives buzzed in perfect harmony, their hive mind making them move like one organism with many bodies. And in the shadows, the mysterious Veilnari floated like living mist, barely visible even in good light. Conference Room Alpha was the largest meeting space on the station. It had been designed to accommodate different types of alien life, with varying gravity zones, atmosphere controls, and temperature settings. Hyunwoo and So-min took their places at the human section of the curved table. The doors opened with a soft hiss, and the Keltharian delegation entered. War Prime Zenthkar was massive even for his species. His crystal-like shell reflected the room's lights in rainbow patterns, and his forearms moved with careful precision. Behind him came his honor guard, 6 smaller Keltharians whose shells pulsed with blue and green lights. They moved in perfect formation, their many eyes scanning the room for threats. Zenthkar's shell suddenly flashed bright orange, and his translator device spoke in careful English. "Greetings, humans of Earth. I am War Prime Zenthkar of the Keltharian Confederacy. I come seeking understanding of your unusual ways." Hyunwoo stood and bowed slightly, a gesture of respect he had learned from studying Keltharian customs. "War Prime Zenthkar, welcome to Harmony's Edge. I am Ambassador Hyunwoo, representing the Terran Diplomatic Corps. We are honored by your presence." The War Prime's shell shifted to yellow patterns, which the translator indicated meant curiosity or confusion. "Ambassador Hyunwoo, we have observed your warriors in combat. They fight with great skill and coordination. This is not unusual. What is unusual is their behavior patterns." "I'm not sure I understand," Hyunwoo said carefully. Zenthakar's 4 eyes focused on him with unsettling intensity. "Your warriors fight together, but they are not from the same family group. They follow orders from leaders who are not their blood relatives. They use complex tactics that require trust between individuals who have no genetic bond. This should not be possible." So-min leaned forward slightly. War Prime, could you explain why this seems impossible to you? The Keltharian's shell flashed through several colors before settling on deep purple. In all known species, warriors fight for specific reasons. They fight to protect their offspring, to claim territory for their family, or to secure mates during breeding season. But your warriors show none of these motivations. They fight for what purpose? Hyun-woo felt a chill run down his spine. He was beginning to understand the problem. The Keltharians, like most alien species they had met, had military forces that only existed during specific needs. The idea of permanent soldiers was foreign to them. Our soldiers fight to protect our people and our territory, Hyun-woo said slowly. They are trained to work together regardless of their family relationships. But we detected no breeding season among your forces. Zenthkar clicked rapidly. No territorial disputes, no resource scarcity. Yet they maintain combat readiness. They practice warfare when there is no war. This behavior pattern makes no sense in any biological model we understand. The other alien delegations around the room had gone quiet. Hyun-woo noticed the Delphini leaning forward in their tanks, their large eyes focused on the conversation. Even the usually chattering Sectorex had stopped their buzzing. War Prime, Hyun-woo said carefully. Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding about human military structure. Our soldiers are professionals. They train and serve as their full-time occupation, whether there is active combat or not. Zenthkar's shell went completely white, which the translator indicated as extreme confusion or shock. Professionals? You mean they receive payment for warrior activities even when no conflict exists? Yes, that's correct. The Keltharian delegation began clicking rapidly among themselves, their shells flashing in complex patterns. Finally, Zenthkar turned back to the humans. This requires much more discussion, he said, his shell now pulsing with deep red patterns that indicated serious concern. We must understand this strange behavior before we can proceed with any agreements. How many of these professional warriors do you maintain? Hyun-woo exchanged a quick glance with Somin. He had a feeling this was going to be a very long meeting. War Prime, he said. I think we need to start from the beginning and explain some basic concepts about human military organization. This may take some time. The alien's shell shifted to bright orange. Time we have, Ambassador. Understanding we desperately need. Lieutenant Dong-hyuk had been enjoying a quiet meal in the station's cafeteria when his communicator buzzed. The message was short and urgent. Report to Conference Room Alpha immediately for cultural consultation. He grabbed his datapad and hurried through the corridors, wondering what kind of diplomatic crisis required a military historian. When he entered the conference room, he found a very tense atmosphere. Ambassador Hyun-woo looked stressed. Captain Somin was frowning at her notes, and the Keltharian delegation was flashing warning colors on their crystal shells. The other alien species around the room watched with obvious interest. Lieutenant Dong-hyuk, Hyun-woo said with relief. Thank you for coming quickly. We need your help explaining human military traditions to our guests. War Prime Zenthkar has some questions about our soldiers. Dong-hyuk bowed to the Keltharian leader, then took a seat next to Somin. She quickly briefed him on the conversation so far. The aliens were confused about human professional soldiers, and the confusion was getting worse instead of better. War Prime Zenthkar's shell pulsed with orange patterns as he focused his 4 eyes on Dong-hyuk. Lieutenant, we understand that your warriors receive payment for their services, but we still do not understand why they would fight for those not related to them. In nature, cooperation requires genetic bonds or mutual benefit. What benefit do your warriors gain from risking their lives for strangers? Dong-hyuk had studied alien military systems for years, so he understood the problem. Most species only fought when they had to, and their fighters were motivated by basic biological drives. The concept of duty to abstract ideals was purely human. War Prime, Dong-hyuk began carefully. Human soldiers fight for several reasons. Some fight for their country, which is like a very large family group that includes millions of people. Others fight for ideas like freedom or justice. And some fight simply because they believe it is the right thing to do. The Keltharian's shell shifted through several colors rapidly. Country? This word does not translate properly. You mean territory? Not exactly. A country is more than territory. It includes the people, their culture, their laws, and their way of life. Human soldiers swear to protect all of these things, even if they never meet most of the people they are protecting. Young Keltharian Thexhai, who had been quiet until now, suddenly flashed bright yellow. They fight for concepts, for ideas that have no physical form? Yes, Dong Hyuk said. Human soldiers will die to protect freedom even though freedom is just an idea. They will fight to defend justice even though justice cannot be touched or seen. The Delphini delegation began making low humming sounds, which their translator indicated as deep thought. The Sectorics buzzed more rapidly, processing this information through their hive mind. Even the shadowy Veil Nari seemed to lean forward with interest. Chief Xenosociologist Yunji, who had been observing from the side of the room, stepped forward. She had been studying the aliens' reactions and her expression was troubled. War Prime, she said. May I ask how long your warriors typically serve? Warriors serve during conflict seasons, Xanthakar replied. When resources become scarce or territory must be defended, the strongest members of each family group take up weapons. When the conflict ends, they return to their normal lives. A warrior might serve 3 or 4 times in their lifetime for a few months each time. Yunji nodded and looked at Dong Hyuk. Lieutenant, could you explain the typical service period for human soldiers? Dong Hyuk felt the weight of all the alien eyes in the room. Human soldiers can serve for 20, 30, even 40 years. Some serve their entire adult lives. They train constantly, even when there is no war. They study tactics, practice with weapons, and prepare for conflicts that may never happen. The room fell completely silent. Even the Sectorics stopped their buzzing. War Prime Xanthakar's shell went through a rapid series of color changes before settling on deep purple. You are saying that humans maintain warriors for decades without active breeding imperatives or resource conflicts? That's correct, Dong Hyuk confirmed. And these warriors train for wars that do not exist? They train for wars that might exist. Human military doctrine is based on being prepared for any possible threat, even ones we haven't encountered yet. Thexhai's shell flashed bright white, indicating shock. Your species maintains warriors even when there is no war. The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Dong Hyuk realized that this simple question had revealed something about humanity that even they hadn't fully understood. Every other species in the room fought when they needed to fight. Humans were the only ones who fought when they didn't need to fight, just in case they might need to later. Captain So-min spoke into the silence. War Prime, perhaps it would help if you understood that humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We learned long ago that the best way to survive is to always be ready for the next conflict. But what if the next conflict never comes? Asked a Delphini representative, her voice bubbling through her water tank speakers. Then we have achieved our goal, So-min replied. The purpose of our military is not to fight wars. The purpose is to prevent wars by being so prepared that no one wants to fight us. Yunji was taking notes rapidly, documenting the aliens' reactions. The Keltharians were clearly struggling with this concept. Their shells kept shifting between colors, indicating confusion and concern. Let me understand this correctly, Xanthakar said slowly. Humans maintain large numbers of warriors during peaceful times. These warriors train for wars that may never happen. They are paid to remain ready for conflicts that do not exist. And the purpose of this is to prevent wars from starting? Essentially, yes, Dong Hyuk confirmed. How many of these professional warriors do you maintain? Thexhai asked. Hyun-woo looked uncomfortable. War Prime, the exact numbers are classified, but human military forces number in the millions across all branches of service. The Keltharian delegation began clicking rapidly among themselves. Their shells flashed through complex patterns of communication that the translators couldn't fully interpret. The other alien species around the room watched with growing alarm. Finally, Xanthakar turned back to the humans. His shell was now a steady, deep red color that indicated serious concern. Millions of warriors, he said quietly, maintained constantly, trained for wars that do not exist, prepared for enemies that have not revealed themselves. He paused, searching for words. This is beyond our understanding of normal military behavior. Dong Hyuk felt a chill run down his spine. He was beginning to realize that what humans considered normal military planning might seem terrifying to other species. The idea of maintaining massive armies during peacetime was something only humans did. War Prime, he said carefully. I think we need to explain more about human military philosophy, but perhaps we should do this gradually to avoid any misunderstandings. Xanthakar's shell pulsed with orange patterns. Lieutenant, we believe the misunderstanding has already occurred. We thought we were meeting with a normal species that happened to be good at fighting. Instead, we find ourselves facing a species that has turned warfare into a permanent way of life." The room fell silent again, and Dong Hyuk realized that this diplomatic meeting had just become much more complicated. War Prime Zenthakar stood motionless for several minutes, his crystal shell cycling through colors that the translator couldn't properly interpret. The other Keltharians in his honor guard remained equally still, their shells flickering with rapid patterns of silent communication. Finally, Zenthakar spoke. "Ambassador Hyunwoo, we require proof of these claims. The concept of permanent warriors is so far outside normal behavior that we cannot accept it without direct observation." Hyunwoo felt his heart sink. Diplomatic meetings were supposed to involve talking, not demonstrations of military power. But he could see the concern in the alien's multiple eyes, and he understood that this was no longer just about making friends. This was about convincing an entire galactic confederation that humanity wasn't a threat. "What kind of proof would satisfy you, War Prime?" he asked carefully. "We wish to observe these permanent warriors in action. We want to see how they function without family bonds, without breeding imperatives, without territorial disputes. If what you claim is true, it will be visible in their behavior." Captain Somin leaned forward. "War Prime, I can arrange for you to observe training exercises. We have a marine company conducting operations on Kepler 442c, about 6 hours from here. It's a standard training planet with multiple environments." Zenthakar's shell shifted to bright orange. "This is acceptable. We will observe your warriors in their natural state." 3 hours later, the mixed fleet of human and alien ships approached Kepler 442c. The planet had been terraformed specifically for military training, with deserts, forests, mountains, and urban environments all within a relatively small area. It was perfect for testing soldiers in different types of combat. Admiral Jae Sung, who had arrived on the heavy cruiser Seoul's Hammer, welcomed the alien delegation aboard his ship. He was an older man with gray hair and calm eyes, and he seemed completely unbothered by the unusual situation. "War Prime," he said through his translator, "our Marines are currently conducting a joint training exercise. They're practicing urban combat, forest operations, and desert survival all in the same mission. You'll be able to observe from our command center." The observation deck of Seoul's Hammer offered a perfect view of the planet below. Multiple screens showed different angles of the training area, and communication systems let them listen to the Marines as they worked. Major Sun-hee appeared on the main screen, her face covered in camouflage paint. She was briefing her company from a position in the forest, and her voice was calm and professional. "Alpha Squad, move to the urban zone and secure the communications tower. Bravo Squad, establish overwatch positions in the hills. Charlie Squad, sweep the desert area for hostile forces. All squads maintain communication and be ready to support each other." War Prime Zenthakar watched the screen with intense focus. "These Marines, they know each other well? They have trained together for many seasons?" Admiral Jae-sung checked his datapad. "Actually, War Prime, this company was formed just 2 weeks ago. The Marines come from different units across the fleet. Some of them have never worked together before this exercise." The Keltharian shell flashed white with shock. On the screen, the 3 squads were moving through their different environments with perfect coordination. Alpha Squad was climbing through the ruins of a fake city, moving from building to building like they had done it 1,000 times. Bravo Squad was setting up sniper positions in the rocky hills, their weapons trained on potential enemy approach routes. Charlie Squad was crossing the desert in a formation that protected them from attack while allowing rapid movement. "How is this possible?" Thexai asked, his young voice filled with confusion. "They move like a family group, but you say they are strangers?" Lieutenant Dong Hyuk, who had joined them for the observation, pointed to one of the screens. "Watch their communication patterns, War Prime. They use standardized procedures that every human Marine learns. It doesn't matter if they've never met before, they all speak the same military language." On the screen, artillery specialist Tae Ho was calling in a simulated airstrike. His voice was clear and professional as he gave coordinates to pilots he had never met, flying aircraft he couldn't see. The pilots responded immediately, trusting his judgment completely. "Target grid 77 Alpha. Danger close to friendly forces. Request precision strike on enemy armor concentration," Tae Ho said into his radio. "Copy. 77 Alpha, danger close confirmed. Precision strike inbound 30 seconds," came the reply from somewhere in the sky. War Prime Zenthkar's shell was cycling through colors rapidly. The flying warriors trust the ground warriors' judgment without question. Without even seeing the target themselves? Standard procedure, Admiral J. Sung explained. Our pilots train to trust our ground controllers, and our ground controllers train to give accurate information. The system works because everyone follows the same rules. On another screen, medic Ye Jin was treating a simulated casualty. The wounded Marine was actually a Delphini observer who had volunteered to participate in the exercise. Ye Jin worked calmly and efficiently, applying medical techniques that had been adapted for the Delphini's unique physiology. She has never treated one of our people before, observed the Delphini representative who had come with them from the station. Yet she works with confidence. Human medics trained to treat different species, explained Captain So Min. We've been sharing medical knowledge with our allies for years. Our soldiers learn to adapt their skills to new situations. Engineer Wu Jin appeared on a third screen, rapidly modifying a communications device to work with Sector X technology. His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he rewired alien circuits, even though he had probably never seen this exact type of equipment before. Adaptation, Admiral J. Sung said simply. Our soldiers train to work with whatever they find, whoever they meet, whatever the situation requires. The most impressive demonstration came when Sniper Bo Young provided overwatch for a mixed-species patrol. Her scope tracked potential threats while protecting soldiers from 3 different alien species, each with different movement patterns and tactical preferences. Contact, 2 o'clock, 600 meters. Her voice crackled over the radio. Hostile forces approaching the diplomatic team. The mixed patrol immediately took defensive positions, each species moving according to their strengths while maintaining unit cohesion. The humans provided covering fire, the Delphini used their water-based weapons for area denial, and the Sector X coordinated their movements through their hive mind connection. Sergeant Minho's voice came over the communication system as he directed the defense. Stay calm, stay professional, protect your teammates regardless of species. Remember your training. War Prime Zenthkar was now completely silent, his shell a deep purple color that indicated profound thought. The exercise continued for another hour, showing the Marines working through complex scenarios that required trust, adaptation, and coordination between species that had completely different ways of thinking. When the exercise ended, Admiral J. Sung turned to the alien delegation. War Prime, what you've observed today is just routine training. Our Marines do this kind of work every day, preparing for situations they may never encounter. Routine, Zenthkar repeated slowly. You call this routine? Yes, sir. This is how we maintain readiness. The Keltharian's shell suddenly flashed bright red, a color the translator indicated as alarm or fear. Admiral, your warriors prepare for wars against unknown enemies using tactics that adapt in real time, with soldiers who trust each other despite having no family bonds. And you do this constantly as a normal part of your existence. That's correct, War Prime. Zenthkar was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was very soft. Admiral, what do you call this system of permanent warriors who stand ready always, not just when conflict arises? Lieutenant Dong Hyuk answered. War Prime, we call it a standing army. Warriors who stand ready at all times. The alien's shell went completely white, and for the first time since they had met him, War Prime Zenthkar looked genuinely afraid. The return journey to Harmony's Edge was conducted in complete silence. War Prime Zenthkar and his honor guard remained in their quarters, their shells flickering with rapid patterns of communication that the human translators couldn't interpret. The other alien delegations were equally quiet, processing what they had witnessed on Kepler 442c. Dr. He Jin, the mission's xenopsychologist, moved through the ship's corridors with her monitoring equipment, checking on the various species' stress levels. Her readings were concerning. The Keltharians showed signs of extreme agitation, the Delphini were exhibiting defensive behaviors, and even the normally calm Veilnari seemed to be clustering together more than usual. Ambassador Hyunwoo found her in the observation lounge, staring at her data with a worried expression. How bad is it? He asked, settling into a chair beside her. Worse than I expected, Hyejin replied, not looking up from her readings. The Keltharians are exhibiting classic signs of cognitive shock. Their entire understanding of military behavior has been challenged and they're struggling to process the implications. And the others? The Delphini understand the concept of professional soldiers. They've seen mercenary forces before. But the scale of human military organization is something they never imagined. The Sectorics are running calculations through their hive mind, trying to determine the threat level we represent. And the Veilnari? She paused, frowning. The Veilnari are scared. I've never seen them exhibit fear responses before. Intelligence Officer Kyung-soo appeared in the doorway, carrying a communication device and looking grim. Ambassador, we have a problem. I've been monitoring alien communications since we left the training planet, and they're calling emergency sessions. What kind of emergency sessions? Hyunwoo asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. They're discussing us, Kyung-soo said, taking a seat. The Keltharian Confederacy has called an urgent meeting of their war council. The Delphini are consulting with their deep thinkers. Even the Sectorics are dedicating processing power to what they're calling the human problem. Hyejin looked up from her data pad. What exactly are they saying? Kyung-soo activated his communication device, and alien voices filled the room through the translator systems. The humans maintain millions of warriors during peacetime, came a Keltharian voice. Their military expenditure represents a significant portion of their total resources, dedicated to preparing for conflicts that may never occur. Another voice, this one Delphini, added, Our economic models cannot predict the upper limits of their military capacity. If they can maintain these forces during peace, what could they mobilize during actual war? A buzzing chorus of Sectorics voices joined the conversation. Human military doctrine appears designed for unlimited expansion. They prepare for wars spanning generations, against enemies that may not yet exist. This represents a fundamental threat to galactic stability. The most disturbing voice came from the Veilnari, speaking in their whisper-like tones. We have observed species that fight when threatened. We have seen species that fight for resources, but humans fight to ensure they never need to fight. They have militarized peace itself. Hyunwoo felt a cold chill run down his spine. This was not how first contact was supposed to go. They had come here to make allies, not to terrify an entire galactic community. Are there any positive responses? He asked hopefully. Kyung-soo shook his head. None that I can detect. The general consensus seems to be that humanity represents an unknown and potentially dangerous factor in galactic politics. The ship's communication system activated, and Captain Soman's voice echoed through the lounge. All senior staff report to Conference Room Alpha. The alien delegations have requested an emergency meeting. When they arrived at the conference room, the atmosphere was tense. The various alien species had arranged themselves around the table in a way that clearly excluded the humans. War Prime Zenthkar stood at the center of the group, his shell pulsing with authoritative red patterns. Ambassador Hyunwoo, he began without preamble, we have spent the journey discussing what we observed today. We have reached certain conclusions about human military capabilities and intentions. I'm listening, War Prime, Hyunwoo replied, though he braced himself for the worst. Your species maintains armies not for defense against known threats, but against unknown possibilities. You prepare for wars that may never come, against enemies that may never exist. Your soldiers train constantly for conflicts spanning multiple generations. This is not normal defensive behavior. The Delphini representative floated forward in her tank. Our calculations indicate that human military capacity has no theoretical upper limit. If you maintain millions of soldiers during peace, what prevents you from maintaining tens of millions during war? The Sectorics buzzed in harmony. Human military doctrine assumes that peace is temporary and war is inevitable. This creates a permanent state of preparation for conflict that other species find threatening. Commander Siwoo, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. He was a Marine officer with 20 years of experience, and his calm demeanor had always impressed the aliens during previous meetings. With respect, he said, his voice steady, you're misunderstanding our intentions. We don't maintain our military to threaten others. We maintain it to protect ourselves and our allies. But how do we know this? Asked Thexhai, his young voice filled with genuine confusion. Your armies exist whether there are threats or not. Your soldiers train whether there are enemies or not. From our perspective, you appear to be preparing for aggressive action. Siwoo looked around the room at the assembled aliens. War Prime, may I ask you a question? Zenthkar's shell shifted to orange, indicating permission. In Keltharian society, when do you prepare for war? When war becomes necessary. Zenthkar replied immediately. And how long does it take to train a warrior? Several months, depending on the type of combat required. Siwu nodded. And how many warriors die while you're training them, after the war has already started? The room fell silent. Zenthkar's shell cycled through several colors before settling on purple, indicating deep thought. I see your point, the War Prime said slowly. You train warriors during peace so they are ready when war comes, reducing casualties when conflict is unavoidable. Exactly, Siwu confirmed. We prepare for war so that peace remains possible. Our soldiers train hard so that when they fight, they can end conflicts quickly and with minimal loss of life. The Veil Nari representative drifted closer, her misty form barely visible. But this assumes that war is inevitable. Most species only fight when directly threatened. Humans seem to assume that threat is constant. Captain Soman joined the conversation. In human history, threat has been constant. We've learned that the price of peace is eternal vigilance. We maintain our military not because we want to fight, but because we never want to be unprepared for those who do want to fight. War Prime Zenthkar was quiet for several minutes, his shell shifting through complex patterns. Finally, he spoke. You prepare for war so that you never need to prove your strength, he said slowly. You maintain warriors in peace to prevent war from starting. That's correct, Hyunwoo confirmed. And you do this constantly, as a permanent feature of your society. Yes. Zenthkar's shell flashed bright white, then settled into a steady red glow. Ambassador Hyunwoo, what you describe is not a military policy. What you describe is a way of life. You have turned warfare into a permanent state of existence. The alien looked around the room at his fellow delegates, then back at the humans. We came here to meet with a species that was good at fighting, he said quietly. Instead, we have discovered a species that has made fighting into an art form, preparation into a science, and readiness into a religion. The room fell completely silent, and Hyunwoo realized that the galaxy's perception of humanity had changed forever. 3 months had passed since the fateful meeting at Harmony's Edge, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Captain Soman stood in the observation deck of the diplomatic station, watching ships from dozens of species come and go with unusual frequency. Everyone, it seemed, wanted to learn more about human military doctrine. The changes had started immediately after the alien delegations returned to their home systems. Within weeks, reports began filtering back to Earth about massive shifts in military thinking across known space. Species that had maintained minimal defense forces for centuries were suddenly establishing permanent military academies. The Delphini had created their first standing navy, with ships that patrolled their territory even during peaceful times. The Sectorics had developed dedicated warrior drones that existed outside their normal breeding cycles, maintained purely for defensive purposes. Even the pacifist Heelmoth had surprised everyone by establishing what they called peace practitioners when individuals, trained in defensive techniques who spent their entire lives preparing for conflicts they hoped would never come. War Prime. Zenthkar had been the most dramatic example of this change. He had renamed himself Peace Guardian Zenthkar and had spent the last 3 months on Earth studying at the Seoul Military Academy alongside human cadets. His reports back to the Keltharian Confederacy had convinced them to completely restructure their military philosophy. Somin smiled as she watched his ship approach the station. He was returning from his latest visit to Earth, and she was curious to hear his thoughts on what he had learned. An hour later, she found herself walking through the carefully maintained gardens of the station's diplomatic quarter with the transformed Keltharian leader. His crystal shell had developed new patterns over the months, colors that indicated contemplation and understanding, rather than the confusion and fear he had shown during their first meeting. Peace Guardian, Somin said, using his preferred title. How was your visit to Earth? Zenthakar's shell pulsed with gentle blue patterns as he considered his response. Enlightening, as always. I spent time with your retired military officers, studying their transition from active service to civilian life. It is a concept that still amazes me. In what way? Your warriors serve for decades preparing for conflicts that may never come. Then they retire and become teachers, farmers, artists, philosophers. They carry their military training with them, but use it to build rather than destroy. It is a form of transformation that my people are still learning to understand. They walked past a group of young cadets from various species who were participating in an exchange program. Humans worked alongside Keltharians, Delphini, and even a few Sectorix individuals, all learning the basics of what humans called strategic thinking. The changes in my own people have been remarkable, Xanthikar continued. Before meeting humans, we fought when we needed to fight. Our warriors would emerge during conflict seasons, battle for territory or resources, then return to their normal lives. It was simple, direct, and limited, and now we understand that the most important battles are the ones that never happen. We maintain warrior scholars who study potential conflicts, prepare for theoretical threats, and work constantly to ensure that our strength prevents war rather than causes it. So-Min noticed a group of Velnari observers floating near the garden's meditation area. Even they had changed since the first contact meeting, becoming more visible and establishing what they called vigilance, circles, groups dedicated to watching for threats that might destabilize galactic peace. The other species have been adapting as well, she observed. Yes, though each in their own way, Xanthikar agreed. The Delphini approach military preparedness like an engineering problem, building efficient systems for defense. The Sectorix treat it as a computational challenge, calculating optimal responses to potential threats. The Velnari see it as a form of meditation, maintaining awareness of danger without being consumed by fear. They reached a small pavilion where retired General Sung-Min was sitting with a group of young officers from various species, discussing military philosophy. The old human general had become something of a celebrity among alien military theorists, and his informal lectures were always well attended. Before meeting humans, General Sung-Min was saying to his diverse audience, most species in the galaxy fought reactively. Threat appears, you respond. Crisis develops, you mobilize. But humans learned long ago that reactive fighting is inefficient and costly. A young Keltharian cadet raised one of his forearms. General, how did humans develop this different approach? Sung-Min smiled. Trial and error, mostly. We fought so many wars throughout our history that we eventually realized the pattern. The side that was better prepared usually won, and the cost of being unprepared was always higher than the cost of being ready. Xanthikar and So-Min paused to listen as the general continued his explanation. Human. Military doctrine is based on a simple principle. It is better to have a weapon and not need it than to need a weapon and not have it. But we applied this principle to everything. Training, logistics, intelligence, strategy, even diplomacy. A Delphini student gurgled a question through her translation device. But General, doesn't this constant preparation create a burden on your society? Of course it does, Sung-Min admitted. Maintaining a standing army is expensive. Training soldiers for wars that may never come requires enormous resources. But the alternative, being unprepared when conflict does arise, is always more expensive. Cadet Jiho, a young human who had been born on one of the outer colonies, raised his hand. General, I've been studying with cadets from other species and they keep asking me about something I don't understand. They want to know why humans seem to assume that war is inevitable. Sung-Min looked thoughtful. That's a good question, Cadet. Do we assume war is inevitable? I think we assume that conflict is possible, Jiho replied carefully. And possibility is enough to justify preparation. Exactly right, Sung-Min said with approval. We don't prepare for war because we want it or because we think it's certain. We prepare because the consequences of being wrong are too terrible to accept. Xanthikar's shell pulsed with understanding patterns. The general speaks wisdom that my people are only beginning to grasp, he said quietly to So-Min. We used to see human military preparedness as aggressive. Now we understand it is the ultimate expression of caution. They continued their walk through the gardens, passing more mixed groups of students and officers. The sight of humans working alongside aliens in military planning exercises had become commonplace. But So-Min still found it remarkable. Peace Guardian, she said. What do you think the long-term effects of these changes will be? Xanthikar was quiet for several minutes, his shell shifting through contemplative colors. Captain, I believe we are witnessing the birth of a new form of galactic civilization. Before humans arrived, each species developed its own approach to conflict and defense. There was no unified understanding of military philosophy. And now there is a standard, the human concept of the standing army, warriors who stand ready always. is becoming the foundation for galactic military thinking. Species that adopt this approach become more stable, more peaceful, and more secure. Those that resist, he paused, his shell flickering with concern. Those that resist become vulnerable, So-Min finished. Precisely. The galaxy is dividing into two groups. Those who understand that preparation prevents war, and those who still believe that strength can be improvised when needed. They had reached the end of the garden path, where a memorial wall honored soldiers from all species who had died in various conflicts over the centuries. Zenthkar stood before it in silence, his shell displaying patterns of respect and remembrance. "Captain," he said finally, "when we first met humans, I asked you to explain why your warriors fought without family bonds, without breeding imperatives, without territorial needs. Do you remember your answer?" So-Min nodded. "I said they fought to protect peace. I thought that was a contradiction in terms," Zenthkar admitted. "How can one fight to protect peace? But now I understand. Peace is not the absence of war. Peace is the presence of strength that makes war unnecessary." As they walked back toward the main station, So-Min reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy had been introduced to a concept that seemed simple on the surface, but was revolutionary in its implications. The idea that the strongest armies were those that never had to prove their strength was spreading from species to species, changing the fundamental nature of interstellar relations. Young Cadet Jiho's voice echoed in her mind as she remembered his final comment during the general's lecture. "Today I learned why the galaxy fears us, not because we make war, but because we made war into a profession, discipline into an art, and readiness into a way of life. We showed them that the most dangerous army is one that never stops preparing for battles it hopes never to fight." Peace Guardian Zenthkar was right. They were witnessing the birth of a new galactic civilization, one where the human concept of the standing army was becoming the foundation for lasting peace. And somehow, in trying to make friends with their neighbors, humanity had accidentally taught the galaxy how to prevent war itself.